Social media, it's everywhere, but is it for everyone? That's what we're here tonight to find out. I'm Jess Narduli. Let's start off by defining two key terms. First off, social media. Social media has been defined as online communication. In the case of this discussion, you may see us focusing on social networking sites, which include but are not limited to Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Second, broadcast media. Broadcast media can be any audiovisual medium, including television, radio, and webcasting, which is online video or audio streaming. Tonight, we'll be looking at the relationship between social media and broadcast media. Joining us tonight are Mr. Jonathan Joy, a communications professor at Clarion University, and Mr. Matt Knoedler, a sophomore Clarion student. Both guests will have roughly 1 minute to respond to each question, and after their responses, they will be given about a 30-second follow-up, should they so choose to take it. Mr. Joy, we'll start with you. When did you first start using social media?
I started using social media because when I was in undergraduate school, that wasn't something that was a huge entity in daily life. And it was after I was out of undergraduate studies that I was, working in the real world that social media started to take a big role in everything. So probably around 2006, especially whenever they made Facebook public, because at the time, obviously, I wasn't still in school, so I didn't have a institution account, so I couldn't access that. But probably around 2006, I started using Facebook. Now, I think I had Twitter for maybe 5 minutes because a friend of mine had it, and I tried it out, but it wasn't for me. It wasn't something that I wanted to be a part of. But through that time, Facebook, but no longer do I use any of that.
Is there a particular reason for that?
I've found that right now, they don't dictate or serve a purpose in my daily life on being able to communicate with other people. I don't think that there's anything negative about it, but I think that those entities or social media in some ways needs to find an educational outlet, and it's not so much, oh, well, this person did this in their daily life, when, what are the other long-term outcomes that this media can have. And right now, I don't see it, but also I'm not blind to how it's an integral part within the classroom, and that, yes, all my students use it, and I need to be up on what is going on with these social media entities.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
What about you, Matt? When did you first start using social media?
Towards the end of my senior year in high school, so the 2010. I never used Facebook a whole lot. That was the first one I got between Facebook and Twitter, the predominant ones nowadays. I never thought of using either form of social media until then, because when a lot of my friends were going off to college, different schools than Clarion, I wanted to be able to talk with them and keep up with them on their daily life, and see what's happening as they progress through life into college, things like that. So I started using it around 2010. I picked up Twitter actually last semester. It sort of my friends kind of told me, hey, give it a shot, and it's actually been beneficial.
Ah, that's great. Okay. We'll follow up with you a bit more. What would you say, of the ones you've looked at, of the ones you know of, what would you think is the most beneficial social media outlet?
I would say Facebook, predominantly because it has more members, and it's easier, I think, to use than Twitter. Twitter, you can use a different an @name, so if you, for example, don't want to use your first name, you could use perhaps a nickname, things like that. And it's easier to find people on Twitter, on Facebook, because you can either search, if they have a nickname, you can search for that, or if they have their actual regular name. Plus, you have the chat feature. You have a lot of different things on Facebook that are more, I believe, instant than Twitter. And it's just, I think it's a little easier to use all around.
Okay. Mr. Joy, I know you don't use it much yourself, but if you had to say one was the most beneficial to everyone else.
Probably Facebook, just because in the time that I did use it, yes, it was easier for me to communicate with those friends or family that were not in close proximity to what I was doing. So from that standpoint, it was easier to keep in contact with them. And Twitter, I just really haven't found what the true purpose of that entity is. But I think that there can be good from it, but definitely Facebook.
All right. Well, now that we've got the basics out of the way, I want to launch into the first segment of our show, which is called The Impact. Many of the most widely used social networking platforms were launched in the early 2000s. LinkedIn started up in 2003, MySpace and Facebook in 2004, and Twitter in 2006. Over the years, the number of users on all of these sites has skyrocketed, and with the increase of users comes a shift in the way we communicate with each other. Matt, I'd like to start with you this time.
Okay.
What would you say is the impact social media has had on broadcasting?
You can watch any cable news network, and they like to integrate social media in to get instant reaction from their viewers, and perhaps I know certain networks even allow viewers to basically, I guess, write the news for them. You know, with certain, for example, I know CNN does what's called an iReport, and from there you can basically submit it onto from your cell phone, your video camera, things like that. Send it straight to CNN. That's been very beneficial for them. Online polls, different things, and I mean, I think that, you know, like I say, all around, I think social media has been pretty beneficial and an integral part of broadcast media so far.
Thank you. Mr. Joy?
Social media is certainly not going anywhere. It has staying power. So you, as I was saying, you can't brush it to the side. And it has become an integral part on how we communicate, how we consume mass media on a daily basis. But what is the end goal for that, and where is it going, and is it always going to be a part of broadcasting, or what is the next part? But it certainly has changed the landscape of how we are getting news to other people. So I think from that standpoint, it can be beneficial, because we've even seen revolutions in other countries have happened because of social media. It's not as we've gone right outside and done it face to face, but we've done it through a digital or online media that has really kind of changed the landscape on how we communicate with one another, especially globally.
Very true. I know we've covered it mostly. I'm just going to stick with you for a second there. Give me something, a positive and a negative as to why social media is important to broadcasting.
Social media can be important to broadcasting if it is used in a positive, powerful way. You know, you are bringing news and other sources to somebody to educate them and better their lives. But at the moment, sometimes I don't see all of that. And I know that we've discussed in class a lot where this acronym of FOMO has come up, where we have a fear of missing out. Where if we aren't included on what's going on in the Facebook community or any other social media, we feel as our day has no worth to it and it lacks something, and we fear that something catastrophic or colossal will happen on there, and if we aren't in tune with that, we've really missed out. But in turn, we're kind of missing out on what's going on right now, you know, in our daily lives beyond what you do when you sit down onto a computer and connect to the internet.
That's a great point. Matt, do you need me to repeat the question?
Yeah, if you could.
Okay. I just wanted to get a positive and a negative as to why social media would be important to broadcasting.
Like I say, I mean, it can deliver the news instantly. In essence, you know, you don't have to wait for the 6 o'clock news. You don't have to wait even for some cable news outlets to deliver news nowadays. I know a lot of my friends said that they were on Twitter when Osama bin Laden, when it was announced that he was killed. And so, I mean, it can be, you know, an instantaneous delivery, but at the same time, some of the facts can become distorted or misconstrued or even wrong. And so, pros and cons, but like Mr. Joyce said, I think, you know, the fact that some people think they're missing out, I think that can, you know, that's why some people take to social media for certain news information. So.
Okay. I'm just going to throw some statistics out here, and either of you, if you have a comment on it, go ahead. According to a TVGuide.com survey, social media drives television ratings, drives up the points. According to the people who took the survey, about 17% started to watch a show, and about 31% continued to watch that show just because of social media and social impression. And then 27%, this is the key one here for me, 27% say they watch more live television instead of things like Hulu and instantaneous online, just because they want to avoid the plot reality spoilers that go out over the social networks. I know that surprised me. I wasn't expecting it to be more people watching television because of social media. Do either of you have opinion on that?
Please, Meg. Go ahead.
All right. I will say for certain live events, if I don't want to know what happens, I won't stay on social media. For example, certain award shows, for example, maybe sporting events. If I'm not able to watch the game right now, I won't go on Twitter for updates. I won't go on Facebook because my friends will, for example, like the Steelers, Heinz Ward. Let's say Mike Wallace gets a touchdown. People tweet about those things. People post about those things, and I don't want to know about it. If I'm at work, for example, I can't watch the game. So in regards to the live television, I believe that I understand that point. You said 27%, correct? So, I mean, I think to me that makes sense, and I guess I would be one of those 27%.
Yeah, I mean, you can absolutely lump me into that percentage of when it comes to live broadcasts, because I sit down and I want to enjoy that moment. And if there's an instance where I have to, say, DVR that show, I will absolutely avoid any type of online content that doesn't divulge a score or, as you were saying, a touchdown from a player or any type of sport in that nature, that I want to be completely screened away from that. But in terms of things that are pre-produced, outlets are limitless. It's okay for me to get online, and whether I use Hulu, YouTube, or do direct downloads from something, whether we deem that legal or illegal.
That's a topic for another discussion.
Yes, it is. But that's okay for me to consume that media in that form. But in terms of live television, I would prefer to be sitting there engrossed in what is happening now compared to, not exactly. So, yeah.
Okay. Let's move on to our second segment, present versus future. With most major forms of social media having been around for less than a decade, many companies are only just beginning to delve into what social media has to offer. In this segment, we're going to discuss just how well we think social media is being utilized and where it might be heading. Mr. Joy, I want to start with you again this time.
All right.
Sorry. Do you think social media is being used to its fullest potential right now?
I do not think it is. As we were saying, why do we get onto these social media sites? Is it for simply entertainment, or do we actually care about what is going on around us, or in a global sense, what is constantly going on? Do we care to know the absolute facts of something that's going on, and then maybe even researching further, or do we really care about just the immediacy, and only caring about what type of entertainment value it has? And coming back to the fear of missing out, is it so important that we need to be in contact with that, or can we actually use other publications, news, magazine, television, radio? Does it always need to be social media? But Matt brought up a point where with social media or anything online, it's a 24-hour cycle. I mean, it doesn't matter if you were up at 2 a.m., you could find out something, or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. There are no time constraints when it comes to that. And a lot of times with all this, things are blurred, and it's hard to define what the internet is going to do for us and what social media will do for us even 5 years from now, let alone 10, 20, or 30 years from now. Is it going to be something different? Will the internet be called Facebook? Will it be that because of somebody like Mark Zuckerberg and having such a strong hold on the internet? It's hard to say really where it's going, but I would love to see it as something that is producing more educational results in the end than purely just entertainment.
Great, thanks. All right, Matt?
I mean, I think it depends on certain demographics as to whether or not it's used to its full potential. I see a lot of people younger than myself, younger, perhaps middle school, high school on Facebook, that they'll say, I guess I don't want to say stupid, but insignificant things throughout their day. But I go on, you have subscriptions on Facebook or certain things you follow on Twitter, and you can get, like you say, breaking news as it happens, things coming in literally instantaneously. So I think it depends on certain demographics, and I also think it depends on your own preferences. For example, Twitter, obviously you choose who you follow. It depends on who, for example, if you're following news organizations, sports teams, for example, they only put out, I guess, important information, whereas if you're following certain friends, they might start complaining about, things in their day, things about other people, things that you don't really want to hear about. So I think it depends on certain demographics as to whether or not it's being used to its full potential. But like Mr. Joyce said, I think 5, maybe 10 years from now, we're going to see the entire internet. I think we'll see more social media, and not just Facebook and Twitter. I think they'll be integral parts of our lives, whether or not we kind of want them to be. I mean, think about Facebook and Twitter. I know a lot of people who tried to dodge both. They couldn't. I mean, their friends kind of. I would say it's a positive peer pressure because you could get it and not use it very often. Some people do that. Other people, they become, quote, addicted and love to be on it. So certain demographics, I think, determine how useful it is in everyday life.
Yeah, I know you bring up a good point. I was researching and everything. I found a quote somewhere, and it said that in the past, Facebook was just something that was there, and you could be on it, and you wouldn't necessarily be the norm. But these days, Facebook is not only there, you're expected to be on it. If you're not on it, you're kind of missing out. The fear of missing out almost. If you're not on Facebook, people seem to think they are missing out, and that's something big. Just to sum up basically what each of you said in your points, give me a percentage, 1 to 100. How well are we currently using social media?
I would say probably 75 to 80%. I think we're close to being where we should be, but like I say, at the same time, I think there's more that we could do.
Okay, Mr. Joy?
I might bring that number down just a little bit more, but maybe, I don't know, close to 60, 65%. And like I said before, you can't get rid of it. It's there. You have to accept that. Now it's your choice on whether you want to use it, or if you are using it, how are you going to use it? So I think that is some of the questions we need to ask, and hopefully we can reach that point. But it being in our lives, it's going to be there. It's not going anywhere. So it's either you're going to fight it or give into it. And if you do give into it, how are you going to use it? And that's more of the question that I would like to pose to anyone. How are you going to use that in your daily life?
It's a good question. Most of these social networking sites, they're very rapidly growing. Like I know you were looking at my list of dates and times a little earlier. Facebook, like I said, began in 2004. Specifically, March 1st, it expanded out of Harvard. And then by December 30th, it had 1 million viewers. And then within the next 4 years, it became the most popular site. It expanded internationally. And as of July 21st, 2011, it had about 500 million people on it. So I mean, there's constantly people entering the fray. Kids are growing up, kids are getting Facebook earlier. So it makes logical sense to me, at least, that it would only continue to go from there. But I'm going to ask for another percentage. I'm going to ask you first because I asked him first last time. Just in even a year from now, how well do you think, will it improve, will it go down, social media as a whole?
I don't want to say that it won't improve because I believe in the positive and proactive efforts of citizens within this country and in a global sense too. So we are redefining how we are consuming media, and I think that percentage will increase. I always want to find the positive in whatever we are doing, and especially in a communication sense, mass media, mass comm. You as a student within this area of study, how are you going to benefit from it, and what are you doing to maybe benefit others? Always on the positive track. Even if I don't use it on a daily basis, I want to make sure that my students, if they are using it, how are they using it, and always pushing towards the positive.
Okay, excellent. What about you, Matt? Think it's going up, down?
I think it is going up now, and I believe it will continue to. Like we say, I know at the time the movie The Social Network came out. Again, The Social Network, movie based on the evolution of Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg's life because of it. And at the time of that movie, it said you can't have 500 million friends without having a few enemies or something to that effect. And now we're seeing Facebook over 600 million, and adding another 100 million users within a year. And so I think it will continue to go up. I don't know how much more. I don't even know if I can give a percentage, because you think about how many people in this country that really don't have Facebook and how many would come back compared to how many do have it now. I think you'll see Twitter go up a little more because of A, there's room for it, but B, I think more people will find it useful in the long run based upon, they want news now, if they want to follow news, for example. So I would see them both going up. It's tough to give a percentage for this one, but like I say, I believe both will go up based upon, I guess, the social aspect. Your friends are on it, things like that. I want to keep up.
Okay, that's great there. I just want to push forward. I like everything you guys have been saying. It's been great. I really appreciate it. But I want to just jump into our final segment. It's broadcasting, social media, and you. As I said, everything social networking-wise is expanding. Companies are beginning to launch into it. They're not quite in it. It's kind of baby steps. We're all taking baby steps right now. So with businesses trying to take these steps to get into it, to understand it, to acknowledge it, it actually is the customer that becomes the expert. So it's a turn of events. Some of these things include, like especially LinkedIn, focusing on that for a moment. It's a professional networking site. It hasn't yet taken the social aspect that Facebook has, but businesses are honing in on it. I know my father runs a company, and he came up to me one day and he said, "Jess, you got to look at this LinkedIn thing." I hadn't even looked at it at that point. He said, "You got to look at this. It's not anywhere yet, but it's going to go viral in the next couple days. You need to get on it now." And it kind of makes sense. So it kind of leads me to my first question. I'm going to actually start with Matt this time.
Yep.
Why or why not is social media a good way to market yourself to businesses?
I think if done correctly, I think it could be very good. Like you say, for example, LinkedIn, instead of having to submit your resume to different businesses whenever you want to apply for a job, you could post all your credentials. A lot of in this field, for example, I don't use the site, so I'm not 100% sure what you can or cannot do, but you could post your credentials on there. I'm sure you could probably post a video or two of what, so if you've done a package here at the news station, for example, you could probably put that online. Marketing yourself online, it could be, I think, a very good thing if done correctly. I wouldn't necessarily use Facebook for it. I wouldn't necessarily even use Twitter for it, but like you say, LinkedIn professional business sites. And I believe you'll see more of those coming, within the next, say, 5 years. I believe that they could be a very good thing. And overall, I mean, like I say, I would expect to see them expand.
Okay. Mr. Joy, you're entering in from it wasn't quite here when you were coming in, was it?
No, but it's still important. But what Matt said is you have to look at it from a professional standpoint. And I really push all of my students, especially if they want to be in the audio-visual aspect of communications, they need to have an online presence, but in terms of an online portfolio. They need to create a website that houses all of their content. And yes, if they want to have links to Facebook, Twitter, that's really important, but you need to create an online presence, but one that filters out any negativity towards you. Who knows what you were doing in 2007, 8, or so on with this new Facebook timeline. Everybody can go back and say, "Oh, look what you were doing here. These are inappropriate pictures that you have." So you need to create an online presence that cuts out all that negativity, brings in a positive, but is an online portfolio that houses things that you want to be doing as a professional.
Okay. I'm going to segue a bit in here in the same section. I had an informational interview with an executive producer at WGBH in Boston. It was a phone interview. We sat down, we talked, and it was basically her explaining to me how the broadcasting world professionally looks at you as a person. And she said something to me that kind of struck me a bit, and it refers to the importance, like college graduates graduating at the moment. She says, new graduates have something in their favor. They can do web-based platforms as well as television and radio. And then she says, multi-platforming is where it's at right now. And how do you feel about this statement?
Oh, I mean, I think it just comes back to what I was talking about, how it's very important. You can't run away from this. It is there, and it is part of our daily life. How can you make it advantageous? And I think that is where you have a positive professional online presence or online portfolio. So I absolutely agree that with her that there are multiple platforms, and how can you use them to benefit you in a good way so that you are getting the jobs or have the career that you want. You know, think very long term, very big picture.
Okay. I know, Matt, this is something that might affect you a bit more because you're aiming towards that goal of graduating. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's like he said. Excuse me, like Mr. Joyce said, it's important to keep a positive online presence. We've seen people post just, you know, the crazy Saturday night party pictures, and when you look at that, that's not going to get you somewhere in the professional world. And for example, like you say, it's not only, I think, if you have social media, that's one thing, but I think nowadays it's expected to have you're expected to have an online presence. And so, like you say, it's like Mr. Joyce said, you might as well make it advantageous. You might as well make it something that will benefit you in the long run, as opposed to something that could be a deterrent for business employers. For example, when we went to the National Broadcasting Society convention a few weeks ago in New York City, there was a little seminar dedicated to social media and how to make it beneficial. And we talked about just, I mean, everything through the thick and thin of social media, how to market yourself, how to keep that positive online presence. And I don't even see it as a lie. I see it as, you know, if people are going to be out there looking, you might as well market yourself in the best way possible. And so, I mean, you know, like I said, there's times that people post, you know, pictures of just possibly inappropriate things. You have the opportunity to take those off. You have the opportunity to make it look good, so why not?
That makes a great opinion. Just want to wrap things up here and finish it up. I'm going to ask each of you just to kind of summarize for me in like a sentence or two where social media is and where it's going. Just a sentence for each. Do you think?
Social media is here. It is here to stay. How are you going to use it to further yourself in a professional, positive manner and actually get the job or employment that you want in the future?
All right, excellent. Matt?
Social media is everywhere, and it is, like I said, it is almost expected nowadays for people to be on Facebook and Twitter, and I believe in the future, I believe that people will be expected to be on these professional websites if you want to have a job. I'm not saying these people are going to make it a criteria, you know, the employers are going to make it a criteria, but I believe that it is here to stay, and I believe it will continue to grow in the future.
Excellent. Social media can educate, it can entertain, and it's constantly evolving. It might be everywhere, but is it for everyone? Whether it is or not is up to you. For everyone here at the station, I'm Jess Narduli, and thank you for tuning in.